Okay, so I'm doing my final presentation on labor rights and farm workers' rights. So these movements really caught my attention because these rights are so many of these rights are still things that we are fighting for today. And I really liked the way it was presented in class because I feel like it showed how much work it takes to get these movements up and running and how long it takes these movements to create any type of substantial change. So here's what we learned. So, grape farmers in California's San Joaquin Valley wanted to unionize for better wages and benefits, and the grape farm owners did not allow them to unionize. The National Farm Workers Association, led by Cesar Chavez and Dolores Huerta, did major organizing for strikes from the farm workers, and they also advocated to boycott the grapes grown in this farm. So all of this lasted for about 2 years. And we watched a documentary with this, and it was called Struggle in the Fields. And in the documentary, we see how difficult it was for farm workers to continue the strikes. The strike became their full time job, and they were living off of money and things like food that people were donating. Um, so it was really difficult for them to continue to do this for so long. The major turning point in this movement was when the boycott expanded to big box stores, who started refusing to purchase grapes from the farm owners who refused to allow their employees to unionize. And in learning about the grape farm workers and learning about the farm workers' strikes, we were able to see how these movements grow and take hold and gain support outside of these specific communities. The Great Boycott sparked the interest in young Chicanx, Mexican American populations, and helped them find their identity and fight for struggles these communities have outside of the farm working community. It expanded to create like an even greater sense of community, solidarity, identity. Another interesting component to all of these strikes that I found was the role that the Catholic Church played. They didn't seem to always recognize the integrity of social justice movements. And they also didn't always seem to recognize the moral value in the organizers' motivation. And I know there was also instances where owners and farm workers were a part of the same clergy, which created some conflict within the church community. So, women's roles in this movement. Women's roles were so important, but nearly unheard of in these labor movements. And they were so essential to mobilizing these movements. We had a feature of Emma Tenayaka, who fought for the rights of pecan workers when pecan farm owners wanted to save money. They were willing to opt out and take they were willing to opt to take away machinery that would break the pecans open, and they wanted to have the workers do the entire process by hand. She faced a lot of hardships after her role in activism, and even had an FBI investigation completed on her. And she was not able to find some jobs after that, and she didn't have like a very easy time. I had to watch Salt of the Earth for another class as well, and I was blown away by the roles women played. And this movie was made in 1954. Um, so I just continue to become more impressed and more proud as I learn more about Chicanx history. But I know that also Salt of the Earth, the main actress, was deported after the film was released. So she also was a woman who was given a really hard time for trying to be a part of these movements. But I think around this time, they were probably afraid that it might spark more strikes. And I think it's these similar fears that sparked the FBI investigation for Tenayaka. I think these movements that inspire such grand change do scare people who are making money off of exploiting others. Mm, I was also Sorry about that. Um, but after all the work women put into the grape boycott, after being alongside men in the fields, they were still lagging behind when it came to reproductive rights. Birth control was difficult to get on the farms, and it was discouraged by many of the organizers. So I feel like the Chicano movement failed them, and the feminism movement also failed them because the feminism movement didn't include very many, well, it didn't include women of color really. So, and this, and I just feel like there was no movement for them to turn to have their voices heard. But it also shows just how many of these problems, oppressions are interconnected and layered. Um, so many of these things start to overlap. So I wanted to cover a little bit farm worker struggles in New Mexico. The reason I enjoyed learning so much about the farm workers movement is because I grew up on a farm in northern New Mexico in Ojo Caliente. In speaking of farm workers' struggles, I personally couldn't compare too many of these same struggles. I couldn't compare our struggles too much to these ones because I grew up around small family owned farms out there. There's no businesses. But our struggles today are definitely droughts, which lead to a fight over resources with the acequia water. A growing population also really contributes to these water issues. Um, Lack of interest in the youth, I think, could bring an end to farming as we know it. Like, we really need laborers. We need people to tend to the land, to clean the acequias, and less are interested or willing to take the work. But that's due to an ever changing economy. I think most people can't really make a living off the land anymore. Um, and the legalization of marijuana has most farmers kind of gearing up for the worst. Um, because with the introduction of legalized cannabis, there's this fear that corporate cannabis is going to enter New Mexico and want to buy the land, take some of the water. So I think people are worried that it's going to affect our water rights immensely. And also, I wanted to talk about women's roles the way I've seen them in my community. I see how much women's roles have changed. I talked about how pleased I was to see it in Salt of the Earth, but I grew up with a grandfather who did not want any of his girls to have anything to do with farming and ranching because I think it was just unheard of in his time. It's just not what girls did. So, and now I know multiple women there or in my community who own their own properties. They do most of the farm work, labor themselves, and they also hold like a full time job on top of all of that. So it makes me really proud to be to be from where I am. So I just thought I would share some of my own thoughts and experiences on the subject matter. Um, and it was a really great semester with all of you. Thank you.